In the serene, sleek classroom of the Varades Advanced Academy, young students settle into their seats, their expressions curious and contemplative. The walls are adorned with holograms depicting various galactic species, each with their unique philosophies and histories. Today, however, the focus is singular: humanity, a species that has puzzled and sometimes horrified the wider cosmos with its approach to conflict. Professor Zilith, an esteemed scholar of interstellar cultures, stands at the front of the class, his features marked by the gentle wisdom of a being who has lived several human lifetimes. Today, we delve into one of the most complex species in the known universe, humanity, he announces, his voice echoing slightly in the hushed room. His tentacles gesture to the holographic display which flickers and transforms to show images of Earth, a planet vibrant with life but scarred by wars. Unlike us, humans have a long history of conflict, Zilith continues, his tone a mixture of fascination and repulsion. The display shifts through scenes of human wars, soldiers in trenches, cities crumbling under bombardment, starships locked in combat above desolate moons. From their world wars to the great galactic standoff, humans have not only endured wars, they've woven them into the fabric of their civilization. A murmur runs through the class. One student, their luminous eyes wide, questions, "But why, Professor? How can they persist, even thrive, with such violence at their core?" Zilith nods, expecting this confusion. It's perplexing, indeed. To us, war is an archaic and barbaric form. Yet, humans view it as a path to resolve disputes, a way to bring about change, or even as a means to peace. This paradox is what we need to understand. Another student chimes in, her voice tinged with disbelief. "It seems so counterintuitive, Professor. How can peace come from chaos?" "That, dear students, is what we aim to uncover," Zilith replies, his own curiosity piqued. Despite their turbulent history, there's wisdom in their resilience and in their capacity to unite under common causes, however fraught those may be. He gestures once more, and the images change to show humans rebuilding after conflicts, treaties being signed, and former enemies shaking hands. Humanity teaches us that fear of war isn't their driving force. Instead, it's the determination to overcome, to adapt, and to forge ahead despite the odds. That is their strength. The room falls silent, each student lost in thought as they ponder the strange dualism of humanity, creators of war, yet also harbingers of profound unity and progress. Let's explore further, Zilith concludes, and see what lessons we can learn from their defiance of the chaos that so often surrounds them. As the lesson progresses, the Varades students begin to see beyond their initial horror, intrigued by the complex tapestry of human nature, a species capable of both great violence and great courage. Their discussions grow more animated, driven by a burgeoning respect for the resilience embedded within humanity's legacy of war. Years before the Varades students ever heard of humanity, their species had a first-hand encounter with Earth's inhabitants. It was during a territorial dispute over a resource-rich asteroid belt, a rare prize in the cosmos that both sides desired. The Varades, long accustomed to settling disputes through diplomacy, approached this matter as they always had, with peaceful intentions. They sent a delegation of their finest diplomats, confident that reason and mutual benefit would prevail. On the other side, humanity responded in a way that left the Varades stunned. Rather than sending their own diplomats, the United Earth Federation deployed a fleet. Warships bristling with weapons entered the disputed zone, positioning themselves around the asteroids like predators preparing to strike. This was not a response the Varades had anticipated. As the Varades emissaries attempted to initiate talks, they were met not with discussion, but with silence from the human fleet. The display of military might was unmistakable, humans were ready for war. Confusion swept through the Varades ranks. Surely, the humans understood the potential cost of such a conflict? Surely, they saw the value in negotiation over destruction? The Varades tried again. They offered an olive branch, presenting their advanced technology as a show of power, not with the intent to provoke, but to demonstrate the futility of fighting them. They believed that once the humans saw the vast gap in technological sophistication, they would reconsider any aggressive actions. This, after all, had worked time and time again with other species. But humans, it seemed, were different. To the Varadi's disbelief, the human fleet did not retreat, did not waver in their stance. Instead, the humans communicated one simple message: the asteroid belt was theirs, and they would not back down. No show of technology, no threat of superior firepower would deter them from their course. One Varadi emissary, baffled by this stubbornness, inquired directly, "Why do you risk so much for mere rock and metal? Why do you seek war when peace is within reach?" The answer they received was chilling. A human commander, calm and unyielding, responded with a statement that would resonate through the Varadi delegation: "We don't fear war, we embrace it." That single sentence sent shockwaves through the Varadi leadership. They were a species that had long since abandoned war, believing it to be a relic of a less enlightened era. Yet here was a species that not only accepted war but seemingly welcomed it. The Varadi, for the first time in millennia, were faced with an opponent whose mindset they could not comprehend. There was a brief pause in the talks as the Varadi leadership regrouped. They had always believed that their superiority in intellect and technology would make any battle unnecessary, that the mere suggestion of war would lead any reasonable species to negotiate. But humans were not reasonable, not in the way the Varadi understood. The Varadi prepared themselves for what was to come. The humans had drawn their line in the sand, and despite the overwhelming odds, they stood resolute. For the Varadi, this was a revelation. They had encountered a race that valued something beyond logic and reason, something primal, something they could not quite grasp. And in that moment, the Varadi realized they were no longer the masters of this negotiation. The humans had taken control, and with their fearless approach, they had turned the entire balance of power on its head. As the negotiations broke down and the Varadi prepared to engage, they still believed their advanced technology would carry the day. Their fleet, composed of enormous, heavily fortified vessels, moved into position. These ships, built for defense and dominance, were marvels of engineering, designed to withstand any conceivable attack. The Varadi had faced lesser species before, and each time, their overwhelming technological superiority had ensured swift victory. But humans, as they were quickly learning, did not fight like any species they had encountered before. Instead of matching the Varadi fleet ship for ship, the humans deployed smaller, faster vessels, darting through space with agility the Varadi had not anticipated. To the Varadi, it appeared almost chaotic, as if the humans had no real plan, no coherent strategy. But this chaos was deliberate, and the Varadi were about to learn the hard way that humanity's true strength lay in their ability to think beyond the conventional. The first human attack came not as a full frontal assault, as the Varadi expected, but in the form of scattered, unpredictable strikes. The humans employed hit-and-run tactics, using their smaller ships to harass the Varadi's massive, slow-moving vessels. These human ships would dart in, fire a volley of shots, and then disappear into the vastness of space before the Varadi could fully respond. At first, the Varadi were bewildered. They had assumed the humans would engage them in a more straightforward manner, relying on brute force and firepower. But these smaller ships were elusive, their movements erratic, and their attacks unrelenting. Each time the Varadi thought they had cornered one of the human vessels, it would vanish into the void, only to reappear moments later in an entirely different sector. The Varadi commanders tried to regroup, issuing orders to recalibrate their strategies. Their massive ships, though powerful, were not designed for this kind of war. They were built to withstand sieges, to dominate large-scale engagements where their superior firepower could crush their enemies. But against the humans, none of their usual tactics seemed to apply. The Varadi launched counterattacks, hoping to catch the human fleet off guard. But each time they committed to a full engagement, the humans would retreat, using their speed to evade the lumbering Varadi ships. Then, just as the Varadi believed the humans had finally withdrawn, another wave of attacks would strike from an unexpected angle, catching them off guard once more. It wasn't just the physical assaults that unnerved the Varadi, it was the psychological warfare. The humans played with their expectations, exploiting their overconfidence in their own technology. Misdirection, surprise attacks, and feints became a constant, keeping the Varadi on edge, unable to predict when or where the next strike would come. The Varadi began to question their assumptions. How could such a seemingly primitive species operate with such cunning? How could they withstand the might of a technologically superior fleet? Each skirmish left the Varadi more disoriented, more frustrated, as they struggled to adapt to the humans' relentless, unpredictable style of combat. For the Varadi, war had always been a matter of superior firepower and defense, a calculated equation where the side with the better technology would inevitably win. But the humans were proving that war was far more complex, a dynamic, ever-shifting struggle where tactics, adaptability, and resilience mattered just as much, if not more, than raw power. As the battle dragged on, it became clear that the humans thrived in chaos. While the Varadi sought control, the humans embraced the disorder of the battlefield, using it to their advantage. Every move they made was designed to keep their opponents off balance, never allowing them to settle into a comfortable rhythm. In the end, it was not the Varadi's superior technology that dictated the course of the battle, but humanity's ability to adapt, to improvise, and to survive in the most uncertain of conditions. The Varadi, for all their advancements, found themselves struggling against a species that had turned unpredictability into an art form, showing them that war was not just about who had the biggest weapons, but who could best navigate the storm. The Varadi, despite their efforts and technological superiority, found themselves locked in a stalemate with humanity. The humans' unorthodox tactics, their ability to thrive in chaos, and their relentless spirit had forced the Varadi to reconsider their approach. After days of conflict, with no clear victor in sight, the Varadi leadership made a decision they had never anticipated. They called for a ceasefire. During the ensuing diplomatic talks, the tension in the air was palpable. The Varadi delegation, though still confident in their technological advantage, now held a deep sense of curiosity about their human counterparts. They had seen something in humanity that defied their expectations, something that they couldn't quite understand. And so, amid the formalities and discussions, one Varadi diplomat finally asked the question that had been haunting them since the start of the conflict: are humans not afraid of war? This simple question hung in the air, echoing through the room. The Varadi, a species that had long since abandoned war as a tool of progress, could not fathom a race that seemed to embrace it so readily. For them, war was a failure of diplomacy, a path taken only by those who lacked the intelligence or foresight to avoid it. And yet, here sat the humans, strong, resilient, and unshaken by the horrors of battle. How could a species, so clearly capable of violence, seem so unafraid of its consequences? The human diplomat, a seasoned negotiator, leaned forward, meeting the Varadi's gaze with calm understanding. "We do not seek war," he began, his tone measured but firm. "But we have learned, through centuries of hardship, that sometimes conflict is inevitable. War is not something we fear, it is something we prepare for. In an often hostile universe, it is not enough to wish for peace. One must be ready to defend it." The Varadi listened in stunned silence as the diplomat continued. He spoke of humanity's long and tumultuous history, of wars fought not for conquest or power, but for survival. He explained that the humans did not glorify war, but neither did they shy away from it when it became necessary. "War is a tool," the diplomat said, "one that we hope to never use, but one that we must always keep at the ready. To face the universe unprepared for conflict is to invite extinction." This idea, that war could be viewed as a tool for survival rather than an expression of aggression, struck a chord with the Varadi. They had always seen their abandonment of violence as a sign of their evolution, a mark of their superiority over other species. But now, they were beginning to see that perhaps their understanding of war was too narrow, too simplistic. For humans, war was not an end in itself, but a means to ensure their continued existence in a universe filled with threats. What truly surprised the Varadi, however, was the next part of the diplomat's explanation. "Our strength," he said, "does not come from our capacity for violence. It comes from our resilience. We fight not because we want to, but because we must. And when the battle is over, we do not seek to hold on to power or territory. We fight to survive, and when the conflict ends, we return to peace." This concept of resilience resonated deeply with the Varadi delegation. They had always viewed peace as the natural state of an advanced civilization, but now they were beginning to understand that peace, for humans, was something hard-earned. It wasn't a passive state to be maintained, but an active pursuit, made all the more precious by the knowledge that it could be taken away at any moment. Humanity's willingness to prepare for the worst allowed them to appreciate the peace they could achieve, even if it meant enduring hardship to preserve it. Back in the classroom, as the Varadi students absorbed the lessons of the day, the gravity of what they had learned began to settle in. They had spent their lives believing that war and peace were mutually exclusive, that a species either embraced violence or it rejected it. But humanity had shown them a different path, one where a species could value peace while still preparing for the inevitability of conflict. A species that, paradoxically, seemed more at peace with itself because it did not fear the worst. The students exchanged glances, each reflecting on the profound contradiction they had just encountered. Humans, for all their capacity for war, had somehow found a way to balance their preparedness for violence with a deep appreciation for peace. It was a lesson the Varadi had never expected to learn, and it left them stunned. In the quiet of the classroom, one student finally broke the silence, voicing what the others were thinking. "Perhaps," he said softly, "it is because they know the horrors of war that they value peace so much." The room fell silent once more, as the students contemplated the weight of those words. For the first time, they understood that humanity's relationship with war was not one of blind aggression, but of survival, and, in that survival, a greater appreciation for the peace they fought to protect. As the lesson drew to a close, the air in the classroom had shifted. The once appalled and judgmental expressions of the Varadi students were now tempered with quiet contemplation. They had begun the day viewing humans as little more than primitive creatures, obsessed with war and chaos. Now, however, their understanding of humanity had deepened. They no longer saw humans as violent brutes, but as a complex and resilient species, molded by the unforgiving nature of their universe. Professor Zilith stood at the front of the class, his usual composed demeanor softened. He could see the change in his students, the way they wrestled with the paradox of humanity. The Varadi had spent millennia evolving beyond violence, cultivating peace as their greatest achievement. But now, they were faced with the unsettling reality that perhaps, in some instances, peace alone was not enough. It was a lesson they had never anticipated, but one they could not ignore. "Today," Zilith began, his voice calm but firm, "we have learned something profound. While the Varadi abhor violence, as we always have, we must acknowledge that humanity's relationship with conflict has been central to their survival. They do not seek out war for the sake of destruction, nor do they revel in violence. What we once perceived as barbarism is, in reality, a form of survival. It is a method by which they have thrived in a universe that is not always kind." The students remained silent, processing the implications of what they had just heard. Zilith could sense their confusion and their curiosity. These young Varadi, who had been taught from birth that peace was the ultimate goal, were now faced with the realization that survival might sometimes demand a different approach. The professor, who had once shared their skepticism about humanity, now found himself in a position to offer a new perspective. "Does this mean we should adopt their ways?" one student finally asked, breaking the stillness in the room. The question hung in the air, loaded with uncertainty. The student's voice carried no judgment, only a genuine desire to understand. If humans had found a way to navigate the dangers of the galaxy through their willingness to confront conflict, could the Varadi afford to remain entirely detached from it? Zilith considered the question carefully. "No," he said, after a brief pause. "I do not believe that we need to embrace war as they have. Our path is different, and our history has shaped us in ways that are unique to our species. However," he continued, his gaze sweeping across the room, "it is clear that we can no longer view humanity as a lesser species because of their approach to conflict. Their strength lies not in their capacity for violence, but in their resilience. In their ability to endure, to adapt, and to overcome even the most dire circumstances." The students nodded, absorbing his words. For the first time, they began to see humanity not as an aberration but as a reflection of the universe's harsh realities. Humans had carved out their place in the galaxy not by avoiding conflict but by confronting it head-on, and in doing so, they had earned the respect of their Varadi counterparts. But will we ever need to learn from them? Another student asked, this time with a hint of unease. It was the question that lingered in all their minds. Could there come a time when the Varadi would be forced to adopt some aspect of humanity's approach to war in order to ensure their own survival? Zilitha's response was measured. Perhaps not, he said. But it is undeniable that our survival might one day depend on understanding the lessons humanity has to offer. Not because we desire conflict, but because we must always be prepared for the challenges that lie ahead. There is wisdom in being ready, even if we hope to never use that knowledge. His words settled over the class, and the students shifted uneasily in their seats. The lesson had not been easy to absorb, but it was one they knew they could not ignore. The galaxy was vast and filled with dangers that they had yet to fully comprehend. If humanity had survived through their adaptability and resilience, then perhaps the Varadi, in their quest for peace, could find a way to coexist with that strength rather than dismiss it. As the students filed out of the classroom, their minds were filled with new thoughts, new questions. The image of humanity, once seen as chaotic and violent, was now far more nuanced. The humans were survivors, and in that survival, they had found a way to protect not only themselves but also the peace they cherished. It was a lesson that would stay with the Varadi students for a long time. The final student lingered at the doorway, casting one last glance at the holographic image of Earth that hovered at the front of the room. The small blue dot, suspended in the vast expanse of space, seemed so fragile, so distant. And yet, it was fiercely protected by the beings who called it home. Fragile, the student whispered to themselves. But resilient. With that, they turned and left, leaving the classroom quiet once more, but forever changed by the lesson of the day.